Hello guys and welcome to the second video of this week. So as I mentioned before, we're going to discuss about the structures of persuasion over here. So these structures are essentially some diagrams that are going to help us somehow organize our persuasive paragraphs in advance if we're going to write, or simply our persuasive discourse, right? Because these sort of elements we can do them before we're going to a debate or any of these forums or things like that, and they may be like a support for being able to have better performance and let's say remember our key points when we're dealing with an expression like that, right? So if you go to the slide number 36, you will see the simple structure of persuasion. Actually, when we arrived to formas discursivas, oh, by the way, I'm not sure if you have that one in this program. I think you do. Anyways, if there's not formas with that name, there must be an equivalent one. We are going to even go deeper onto this structure, right? Like, let's say that in this semester you're going to cover only of these two, probably the simplest ones, but there are like some other ones more complex, taking into account more characteristics, etc. Right? So let's go with the simple one. As you can see, it has like three components. The first one is the premise, and the premise is basically the idea that you want to defend, the position that you have adopted and that you want to sort of support, right? So what are you going to do when you're doing a simple structure of persuasion? Well, you do this diagram, the schematics over here, and you're going to write only simple sentences or sometimes even words, because this is like a draft, right? Not something. This is not your text yourself. This is just some notes that you're taking to later on write a more complete paragraph or provide a much more complete explanation, right? So the premise is that. Remember that the premise is the position that you adopted. So over here, what you're going to do is to write it. Yes, that is going to be the premise. So the premise is abortion should be legal or abortion should not be legal, right? Whatever that you have sort of decided, right? Then we have the law of passage. That is really a really fancy name, if we want to call it that way, for the arguments, right? So we have already mentioned that in the previous video. We mentioned mental health for the mother, economic problems that may be, let's say, solved or avoided better, economic problems that can be avoided. And we can add some other ones, like such as avoiding the risk of a clandestine abortion, that sometimes doing it illegally may cause health problems to women, all these different things, freedom, well, etc. So what you can do is just to write a list, a short list. It may be words, it may be expressions, it may be sentences, but that's it. Now, as we are dealing with a structure of paragraphs of three supporting sentences, so I'm going to ask you to write at least three of them. Yes, not right now. I am just doing the explanation and giving you the examples, but we will do it in the assignment, right? So I have just already mentioned in this one 3 or 4 reasons. If I think more, probably I can come up with even more possibilities over here, and that's it. And the conclusion, well, the conclusion, it should be exactly the same that the premise. Yes, abortion should be legal. Why? Because of the reason in the law of passage. So the conclusion is that abortion should be legal. Yes, I know it sounds repetitive, but it's perfectly logical if you think about it, right? So this was my premise, and my conclusion is that after this, and these reasons, well, the premise is true. Simple, right? Very simple. And actually, it respects the structure of 5 sentences that we have been using throughout the semester. An introductory sentence that can be, exactly the premise, or precisely the premise. 3 supporting sentences that can be the arguments, and if you have more arguments, so you write more supporting sentences. And one conclusion. See, the paragraph is there. Five sentences. Good. So this is the simple structure of persuasion. Let's take a look at the second one, that is the structure with reserve. So if you take a look at it, you will see that it is exactly the same that the previous one. It only has one component that is additional, right? So the premise is the same one. Abortion should be legal, for example. Love passage, the reasons that I mentioned: economic, psychological, mental, health, freedom, etc. Right? And then we have the reserve. So what is this reserve? This reserve is to anticipate something that other person can tell you. Yes? Let's say a weak spot, or a weak some sort of argumentative gap that it may be there into your argument. So you say, okay, I am convinced about this idea, I know this position, I know that the arguments are good, but I know that there are certain things that may be problematic. Yes? So you're going to think yourself, you're going to anticipate what other people can tell you, and you are going to try to solve that situation. Yes? So let's think about this. What is a common, let's say, counter-argument for the legalization of abortion, for example? You can say, okay, but they are killing the kid, they are killing like the baby, and they are making him suffer, or something like that. Yes? So that may be, let's say, something that destroys somehow, or that make your argument weaker. Yes? That is going to weaken your authority somehow, the reasoning process that you provide, right? So, as you know that the other person is going to tell you that, so you need to have some argument in reserve. That is why it is called reserve, right? So you're going to try to solve that. What you're going to do first is to write the reserve. Abortion equals to killing, the fetus suffers, or the baby suffers, for example, right? So what you can do over there is to anticipate what you're going to say. By the time in which the abortion is taking place, by that number of weeks, the fetus has not developed any sort of, let's say, nervous endings that is going to permit that the fetus has a consciousness, and that, of course, that suffers pain. It doesn't happen, right? So with that counter argument, you have already solved that, and that is going to be very useful, because normally when somebody has a reserve, you have to start thinking on the spot. Yes, very quickly, without preparation. So that makes you sort of look not so sure about yourself, prepared, a little bit insecure. So that is always going to weaken your persuasion. People are going to say, but look at him, he's being dubious, his tone of voice is nervous, or something like that, so he's not so sure about it. Whilst if you have this reserve, you are going to be able to sound sure of yourself and prepare, etc. Right? So that's it. Basically, the reserve is anticipating some questions, some affirmations, some problematic part of your position, and try to give it a solution. Yes. Sometimes it is possible to completely, let's say, eradicate this attack. But in some other cases, you can only minimize it, yes, because definitely there are topics that, you cannot defend at certain levels. But that's it. And the conclusion, well, again, the same. The conclusion is going to be the same than the premise, yes, because it's supposed that after you give the arguments, after you solve the reserve or the possible attack that you were given, you are going to supposedly finally convince the person. Very well, guys. So that was it for this week. What we are going to do right now is to explain the assignments for this week, right? So as I mentioned before, we are going to have only one assignment, and the assignment will have two parts. The first part is about the poem that I read at the beginning. Yes. So please, you are going to simply classify it into one of the let's say paragraphs that we have seen. I know that those are not paragraphs. Yes. The poem, as the way it is written, it is not really a paragraph. It has some other elements that actually makes it a poem. A poem is different from a paragraph. But you're going to think about the elements it has. Yes. So you're going to decide if it is descriptive, if it is narrative, or if it is persuasive. Okay. I know that it may have combinations of all of them. Yes, it may have a little bit of description, but also it may have persuasion, but also it may have narration. Yes, or it may have two, I don't know, description and narration and not persuasion. You have to analyze it, right? But I am going to ask you to decide on one. Yes, so even though it has, I don't know, descriptive arguments, it's mostly a narration. Okay, so I'm going to ask you please to write a short justification and maybe 3 or 4 lines of why you classify the poem as being either descriptive or narrative or persuasive. That is going to be the first part. Okay. Now, for the second assignment, please go to the slide number 38, and you will see that there are these different things. Yes. So it says use the second structure of persuasion to persuade other people that. Okay. So you're going to use the structure in the slide number 37, right? The one that has a reserve, and you are going to select one of these. Okay. The first one, bicycle is the best transportation option in big cities. Yes. So I am giving you, let's say, the examples or the sentences or the statements that are there are being positive or affirmative. Bicycle is the best transportation option in big cities. But if you think that it is not, so you can also select that. Bicycle is not the best transportation options in big cities. Or maybe you would like to change the vehicle. Yes, you don't want it to be a bicycle. You want it to be walking, or you want it to be motorcycles, or skates, or cars, or whatever, right? So this is only like an example. You can select it exactly as it is. You can make it negative, or you can change the vehicle. Okay. So what do you have to do? Well, simply do this diagram. You can do it by hand, or you can do it just copy and paste it and edit it in Paint or Photoshop or something like that. Or you can simply write the titles: premise, love passage, reserve, and conclusion. Yes, without the diagram. That way it's less fun. I think that graphically it looks a little bit better, but it's up to you. Probably you don't have the resources to do it, so that can be a possibility, right? So remember the premise, why the bicycle, the premise should be, for example, if we have the first case, that the bicycle is the best option for traveling around the city. The love passage are the arguments that you are going to give for it. So you enumerate the different, let's say, positive things or advantages of bicycles. The reserve, that will be some people is going to tell you, okay, but it is not the best because of this, and that. Yes, so you are going to put the objection in there, and you are going to try to solve it or minimize it. Oh yeah, let's say bicycle has a lot of accidents. People have a lot of accidents when they are in bicycles. Oh, sure, they have, but most of the times they are not fatal accidents, and many cases they are provoked or induced by cars. Yes, so it's not a thing of the bicycle, but a thing of the cars actually, for example, right? And the conclusion should be exactly the same. So you select only one topic, no more, okay? Only one topic, and you do it. The second one is a particular music genre of your preference is more intellectually stimulating than others. So you're going to say, for example, that, I don't know, classical music is better than reggaeton, for example, yeah? Or rock music is better than whatever, merengue, right? Or salsa music is much better than metal, for example. You decide, right? And that one of the other one is more intellectually stimulating than other, right? Or simply you can say that that thing of intellectually stimulating doesn't exist and that all music is fine and that whatever, right? It depends on your position. This is just the model, and you are going to do it in that way. Or the final one, it says illegal drugs, should have a different treatment in universities. This is different treatment. I am not saying anything pro or against. That is why I give it for you. Different treatment. It may be legalization. It can be complete prohibition. It can be exclusive zones for consumption. Well, I don't know. You name it. You may have like different positions about it, and that is why I put it over here. So you're going to do this diagram. Yes, about the topic that you select. Remember something really short, like a sentence. In the law of passage, you enumerate the good reasons. In the reserve, you mention the reserve, and then the solution, and in the conclusion, you write basically the same than in the premise. Something really short. And after that, based on that diagram that you did or that description, you're going to write one persuasive paragraph. Okay, only one persuasive paragraph of a minimum of 5 sentences. Remember that if you have, for example, 3 reasons in the law of passage, well, those 3 reasons should be your supporting sentences, right? So in the diagram, they can be only words or short, expressions, but you're going to develop that a little bit more on the paragraph that you write, okay? Now, if you want, you can use some of the persuasive connectors that you will find in the slide from 39 to 43. Yes? So we have different persuasive connectors that I put there for you to use. You can use any of those. That will be the transitional words. So we have persuasive connectors of cause, for example, because of, given that, and as much as. Persuasive connectors of certainty, like when you're completely sure about it. So we have it is evident, it is undeniable, undoubtedly, etc. We have persuasive connectors of condition. So when you establish some sort of dependability relationship between one thing and the other, if, as long as, according to, unless that, etc. The one of consequence, right? So one thing has this result. Thereupon, then, for this, therefore, thus, hence, and finally you have the ones of opposition, right? So this is really useful, especially when you are making contrasts. Yes, like this is better than the other, this is worse than the other. Let's put them together and compare them. So we have conversely, bad, contrary, adversely, nonetheless, opposingly, while, whilst, etc. Okay, so please remember, we have 2 assignments, maybe 3, let's say, or 3 parts. The first one that will be deciding if the poem that I've read is descriptive, narrative, or persuasive, and why. I mentioned 2 or 3 lines. And the second one that consists on doing the diagram, and after, based on the diagram, writing the persuasive paragraph. Okay, remember to follow the instructions, to follow the different types of conclusions, to use good punctuation. I noticed that some of you, I don't know, maybe if it's because of habit or something, probably are spending a long time before putting the first period. There are like 5, 7 sentences, sometimes only separated by commas, and then a period. So try to not take so long, because then the rest of the, it seems like you don't have an introductory sentence. It's just the first part. And remember also the capital letters, right? It's important when we have a period, we start with a capital, or when we start the paragraph, okay? Well, thank you very much, guys. See you then, and next week. Hope everything goes well with you. Bye-bye.